What does America, art, wrecking ball, and fireworks have in common? At long last, the concluding episode of Bridgerton. Cheerio, everyone. This is D Movie Man, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And today, of course, I'm coming to you all with another episode of Bridgerton, Season 2, Episode 8, our season finale, The Viscount Who Loved Me. This episode was directed by Cheryl Dunye, who directed our previous episode. This episode was also written by Jess Brownell, who also co-wrote our 4th episode. And now, let us commence. So we open up this episode picking up right where we left off the last time. Not only has Kate fallen off of her horse, but she's also sustained a cut to the back of her head as a result. Anthony does manage to rescue her and bring her back to Lady Danbury's home. However, her fate is entirely up in the air. And as for Anthony, he can't help but blame himself for what is now taking place. We go ahead and hit our title card, and then we see how the town is reacting to the sudden disappearance of the one and only Lady Whistledown. Everyone seems to be puzzled, confused, and even frustrated. But as for the author herself, she's decided that she's through ruining other people's lives. We discover that Lady Featherington will be throwing the ball to celebrate their good fortune, aka the earnings from their recent scam. And surprisingly, she's even willing to invite the Bridgertons and the Sharmas, in spite of their recent scandal. Speaking of scams, we see Anthony confronting Coughlan over the missing money from their accounts. Coughlan attempts to explain how he set aside the money for a new investment with the new Lord Featherington. But before that conversation can continue, the rest of the Bridgerton siblings decide that they've had enough of listening to Anthony and excuse themselves from the room. Bye-bye. This then leaves Violet and Anthony in the room alone, and Violet is surprised to hear that Anthony has not visited Kate in nearly a week. Anthony snaps at her and says that it's because he's been busy, but it's very clear to Violet that there's something else much deeper going on with Anthony. Next, Eloise discovers that a package has been delivered to her, which is a book with a note left inside. And surprisingly, the note turns out to be from our very own Theo Sharp from the printers. Eloise is not happy to discover that Theo kept from her that this is the same place that Lady Whistledown has used to print her circular. Theo admits that he was very worried about Lady Whistledown finding out about their, kinship, shall we say, so he chose to end things rather than risk that happening. He then apologizes to her and admits that Lady Whistledown seems to have taken her business elsewhere. But as far as Eloise is concerned, they are both now in the perfect position to track her down once and for all. Which is perfect, because they have their first lead. Theo is aware that these manuscripts have come bound not in wrappings, but sewn into silks. I have to say, I'm really happy to see these two back on board because I've just really enjoyed seeing them interact and just seeing their dynamic throughout the show. So yeah, I'm definitely here for it. We then see Lady Danbury at the palace, having tea with the Queen, who is currently rocking a mini-fro, which I love. And I must say that this is another friendship/relationship that I've enjoyed seeing develop. However, part of the reason that the Queen has invited Lady Danbury is that without Lady Whistledown making her usual rounds, the Queen is in need of stimulating conversation. Unfortunately, it's just not the same. Elsewhere, at Will's bar, we see that the owner himself is currently staring down Cousin Jack and Colin, who have met to discuss their investment. Will is quite aware of what's about to go down. Alice warns him to tend to his own business, but Will, of course, can't help himself. He decides to completely air Cousin Jack out, also admitting to his own involvement with the late Lord Featherington regarding his match. However, this is all for naught, as Colin decides to dismiss Will's accusation completely. This is the wrong road, my friend. And speaking of Cousin Jack, his gambit continues when he informs Lady Featherington that it would be best for them to move to the Americas. They can start over in a new city with endless opportunities and wealth to secure without people asking for returns on their investments. He also is being intensely flirtatious as he informs her of this. But, I'm fairly sure there's some game being run here. We also see Edwina by Kate's bedside, and it would appear that at last the ice has finally thawed. It's clear how much she still needs her sister and doesn't want to lose her. And thankfully, she won't. After nearly a week, Kate has finally regained consciousness. Although everyone is happy to see that Kate is doing well, she herself is disappointed to discover that after rescuing her, the Viscount never did appear again to visit her. We also see Violet informing Anthony of Kate's recovery, and in a tearful confession, she admits how sorry she is for the circumstances of Edmund's death, how it affected him, and everything that she also contributed to that pain and trauma in the days following. She would give anything to change those circumstances and to change her hand in it as well. But she also knows that despite the unimaginable, debilitating pain of that experience, she would gladly go through it again. Because real love, true love, is always worth it. And with that said, she knows that Anthony cannot lose Kate now. We see Eloise on the case as she confronts Madame Delacroix at her place of business. However, Madame Delacroix continues to deny the accusations, and things get quite awkward when Lady Featherington and her daughters, which of course includes the real Lady Whistledown, enters the room. Eloise steps aside with Penelope and spills the beans about everything that she's recently discovered. And of course, in her own crafty way, Penelope is trying to dissuade Eloise from continuing on this hunt, warning her that rumors about Eloise and Theo are starting to spread all around town. In the end, Penelope dismisses the entire affair and hopes that eventually things will return to how they used to be between the two of them. Knowing Eloise, I don't think she's going for it. Next, we see that Benedict's artistic dreams are all but shattered when he discovers that his admittance to the academy only came because of Anthony's large donation. Clearly, Benedict was not aware of this, which does not bode well for he and Anthony's relationship. Finally, we see Anthony visiting Kate, and initially their conversation is very tense and quite awkward. But eventually, he mentions that he has come to apologize and ask her to marry him. Apparently, Violet's words have really sunk in. Unfortunately, Kate shuts this all down and lets him know that she is returning to India. As far as finances are concerned, Lady Danbury has offered to sponsor Lady Mary and Edwina for another season. But as far as Kate and Anthony, it's a no-go, and she asks him to leave. Over at the printer, Eloise finally comes to her senses when she and Theo nearly kiss, and she realizes that things have just gone too far. After all, if any consequences were to fall upon Theo as a result of her actions, she could never forgive herself. Sadly, it's very clear that Theo has interpreted this as Eloise simply abandoning him and returning to her life of privilege and carefree living. We see that they are both very tearful and they are both very upset, yet and still, this is the end of the road. And I'm not happy about it. Kate finally has a conversation with Edwina, and she knows that it's going to take quite a long time to regain her trust again, but she's willing to do whatever it takes to ensure that this happens. Kate manages to explain everything that has gone down, and after hearing all this, Edwina realizes that they don't know that much about each other. They don't even know that much about themselves individually. Perhaps it's time for them to finally figure that out with the truth as their foundation. We also see a conversation between Lady Mary and Kate that was even more profound, even more heartfelt, and very powerful. Lady Mary acknowledges all she should have done in the wake of Kate's father passing and not allowing Kate to simply take on that burden herself. As far as Kate is concerned, she felt like she owed it to Lady Mary because of everything she did for her. And Lady Mary's like, excuse me? She tells her that she loved her from the day she met her. She was her daughter from day one and has been ever since. And I was like, I loved seeing that. I loved hearing that. And I just really have such a respect and admiration for people who really attach themselves to stepchildren or children, that, of course, become their children by marriage. Because unfortunately, we see stories like Cinderella and we see how sometimes those dynamics can actually be reflected in real life. Not that it's a difficult or hard thing necessarily, but it's not a dynamic that we always see. It's all the more impactful when someone, with no biological ties or, blood relation, they still have that connection and they see them as their own child, they see them as their parent, and I feel like that's such a beautiful thing. So I was totally here for this moment. Next, we see the Featherington Ball, which is impressive enough on its own, but the real stamp of approval comes when the queen herself makes her way inside. Eloise makes her way over to Penelope, and she tells her of everything that has gone down with Theo and how at this point she's done with Lady Whistledown, she's done with the search and all of this. She's ready to just move on. Penelope is relieved for obvious reasons, but Penelope is not very aware of how much Lady Whistledown is ingrained within her, because Penelope is recounting all this gossip and all these rumors she's overheard to Eloise. And Eloise has suddenly realized just how good Penelope is at making all these observations about everyone. Oh, man. It is about to go down. Next, we see Penelope looking quite uncomfortable as Coughlan dances with Cressida Cowper. However, he suddenly makes an observation that the clasp is broken on her necklace, and he decides to take it aside to get it checked by his valet. He then takes Penelope aside and informs her of everything that Cousin Jack is up to. Yes, thankfully, Coughlan has heeded Will's advice, and he knows absolutely what time it is. He also tells this to Cousin Jack's face as he and Lady Featherington walk in on Coughlan and Penelope. It would appear that the so-called ruby necklace is actually made out of glass. He also demands Cousin Jack return all the funds that he's collected and to leave town immediately. Lady Featherington then expresses her so-called gratitude for Coughlan and asks Penelope to leave the room. Cousin Jack now knows that he and Lady Featherington's trip to the Americas must happen as soon as possible. Plus, with him no longer having to be bound to Prudence, perhaps he and Lady Featherington could figure out a new situation. We also see Penelope thank Coughlan for his intervention, and as they dance together, Coughlan tells Penelope that he'll always protect her and that she's very special to him. And of course, Penelope agrees. We also see Kate and Anthony finally taking the opportunity to converse and even dance, no longer worried about the ton given recent events. We then see them dancing together for the last time as a quartet version of Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus plays in the background. We also see the Queen looking quite pleased watching the two of them dance. And when she also overhears Lady Cowper attempting to spread some gossip about those two being the reason why the wedding ended, the Queen corrects her very quickly and says, no. That's because I changed my mind. Edwina remarks that the two of them look quite beautiful together. The Queen agrees, and she ensures that everyone nearby agrees as well. Listen, the Queen was like, look, I run this, and what I say goes. Fall in line, thank you, and good night. I love it. And the Queen also makes sure to tell Edwina about her nephew, the Prince, who is still very much available. We see Penelope head home, and once she enters her room, she sees that it has basically been turned upside down, and that is because Eloise has discovered the money that she has set aside. As I mentioned before, although Eloise was not new to Penelope speaking about gossip, tonight was the first time she actually heard her really speaking about gossip and understanding just how much she knew about everyone. It sounded quite familiar, written almost. She also recognizes the pattern of certain gossip being discussed and certain things happening, and then them being printed in the circular immediately after. I mean, who else would have known of Marina's pregnancy but Penelope? Additionally, Penelope mentioned how everyone was discussing Eloise and Theo, but if that was the case, why did Lady Whistledown not print it weeks beforehand? In other words, the game is up. And then, of course, Penelope starts to cry and she assures Eloise that everything she did was to save her. And Eloise is like, no, 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 no. Everything you did was to save yourself at a cost to everyone else. Penelope is still trying to defend herself, but Eloise is like, you know what? It's all good. Because all I feel is pity for you. Sequestered in this little room, trashing everyone in your scandal sheet because you are too afraid to stand up for yourself in real life. I said, yikes. Eloise then turns to leave, but that's not the end of this exchange. Penelope blasts Eloise for being the person to always talk about doing something, but never accomplishing anything. And now that Penelope is the one who's done something great, Eloise can't stand it. I was just like, I get where you're trying to go with that, but considering the deception and manipulation and, everything that's gone on, I'm pretty sure that's her bigger issue. But it doesn't matter, because as far as Eloise is concerned, she has no desire to speak to, talk to, or socialize with Penelope ever again. Cousin Jack mentions how nice it is that they can give a memorable farewell party. Lady Featherington then informs Cousin Jack that the farewell party is, in fact, for him. Some of his belongings have been packed up. He's been given a little bit of money to get on a boat to the Americas, solo dolo. Cousin Jack is shocked. He's like, I thought we were a team, and so on. And Lady Featherington lets him know that I have a team. Their names are Prudence, Philippa, and Penelope. Additionally, we find out that Lady Featherington got Mrs. Varley to sign a document saying that as soon as one of her daughters has a son, the estate will then pass to them. But as for Cousin Jack, I don't think the ton will be too happy to hear about all the money you've scammed them out of. And as far as Lady Featherington's involvement, I'm pretty sure no one will believe that this strong, confident man had to rely on this woman to assist him with his schemes. Cousin Jack then says, "You're cruel." And Lady Featherington says, "What I am is a mother." And it's pretty obvious that that title trumps everything else. We also see Penelope overhear Colin and his friends, who are basically mocking Penelope and Colin. And Colin makes it very clear that he has no desire to court Penelope. Not now, not ever. And I was just thinking, dealing with this kind of situation, hearing that kind of revelation, it might be easier to bear if you had, I don't know, a best friend that you could discuss those kind of situations with, but that's not happening. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Benedict finally speaks with Anthony about the donation, and it's not quite the heated blowout I was expecting. Benedict admits that perhaps he's simply not that good when it comes to art. But Anthony reassures him that art is one of his many talents, which includes seeing what others need, even when they can't see it themselves. Anthony then makes his way over to Kate in the garden. She still plans on leaving for India, but Anthony has a confession. Surprise, surprise. He loves Kate. From the first moment they race together, every dance, every walk, every moment together. Ultimately, Kate can't really say anything, except that she feels the exact same way, which we already knew. Although she admits that there never will be a day where he does not vex her. Anthony hopes that this is indeed a promise from Kathani Sharma. Yes, it is a promise, and it has been a long time coming, but it's finally here. They embrace each other as a bevy of fireworks explode in the sky above. We also see Colin meeting up with Will, and he apologizes for his actions the other day, mainly because he needed to gain the trust of Cousin Jack. With Will's honorable character now in consideration, Colin has brought him an unexpected surprise. A massive crowd of customers, as Colin is now officially in Will's debt. Can we say cha-ching? We also hear a voiceover of Penelope saying that there are times where silence is necessary and times where it is not. We then hear the voice of Lady Whistledown saying that despite the belief that she had somehow been silenced, what everyone should know is that this author cannot keep quiet for long. We then see a brief epilogue of Kate and Anthony sharing more than just tea together. It seems that the Bridgerton family has returned to Aubrey Hall, and that officially includes the Viscount Bridgerton and his new Viscountess, Kate Bridgerton. And as the two embrace, it would appear that, for once, in society and in the world, all is finally at peace. At least, for now. And that officially closes out Episode 8, The Viscount Who Loved Me, our season finale, and that officially closes out Season 2 of Bridgerton. Whew! This was a long and extensive journey that I was not anticipating or expecting. Life, priorities, and other things really got in the way. But I really do appreciate the people who still hung in there, who still liked, who commented, who just stuck with me regardless. And that even includes some people who don't even watch the show and just popped in to support. I thank you guys so much as well. Now, as far as this season and how it compares to the first and my general thoughts, I'll say first off that I think that this season was fine without Regé-Jean Page. Would it have been nice for us to see the Duke again and see him and Daphne together? Yes, but it didn't ruin anything for me, and I felt like there was still enough going on, especially with Kate and Anthony, to where we didn't necessarily need his character. That's just how I feel. Now, personally, I felt that Kate and Anthony technically had more chemistry than Daphne and the Duke, because I wasn't 100% down with them, as a couple in the first season, but I think what made it work was the writing, were the different dynamics. Like, we saw layers to them getting to know each other and, this whole plot going on. And I think it made it very compelling to watch, so that by the time we got to the end, it was like, okay, I see it, I get it, we've been through a journey, totally into it. Although I still feel like they messed up with that whole assault piece. We could have found a way to make that story work without that. That was like that was a no for me. But everything else I was able to appreciate as far as the progression of their story arc together and individually. So in comparison, I just felt like with Kate and Anthony, the dynamic between them was too repetitive. Like I even said in some of the recaps, heavy breathing and, like the argument and the heavy breathing and the, we're in each other's face. It was too repetitive, and I think we needed to see more layers to them. We needed to see them learning more about each other and appreciating more about, each other and their lives than just, I just feel like you have to have more dimension to characters if we're supposed to appreciate their journey, especially romantically. I get that it's enemies to lovers, but I just felt like we needed more shades of gray between the enemies and the lovers. I just think those opportunities were really wasted. It became more stereotypical as far as the heaving bosom and the, internal passion. It was too goofy, I think, the way that it was handled. It was there, you could see the intensity, but there just weren't enough layers to that. And I just think it kind of diminished their journey together. I also think that the supporting characters and stories were incorporated a lot better into the first season than this. Now, I don't know if it had anything to do with this season being made in the midst of the Ponderosa and, Regé-Jean Page leaving and maybe them having to scramble a little bit from a writing perspective. But I just felt like there was a bit more going on, with Lady Featherington. We had Marina, in that first season, and Colin, and that whole thing going on. We had Anthony and Sienna. I just felt like there was more going on with the other characters. I really felt like Benedict brought nothing to this season. Like, I understand that maybe because he's not the focus, he's going to have his own personal story throughout the season later on. But it's almost like they didn't know what to do with him because every time they would jump over to the art academy, I was just like, okay. And Benedict is an interesting character, but they gave him nothing this season. And what's really funny is that after a certain point, I didn't even mention Benedict because it's like, this is like nothing. I just basically waited until this last recap and I was just like, oh yeah, we've seen some stuff with Benedict at the art academy. We've seen some stuff with him and Tessa, but it didn't amount to anything. So I just feel like Benedict could have been cut from this season and it wouldn't have changed anything. And we basically could have taken that time and used it to develop Kate and Anthony's relationship a whole lot more. I think we even could have seen more with Kate and Edwina and their relationship as sisters. We could have seen how Lady Mary, their dynamic, with her two daughters and how, that played out more. It's just, there were certain things that were underdeveloped and I just felt like the supporting, stories just didn't come together as well as they did the first season. But overall, I still enjoy this world very much. It's so fun and enjoyable. I love a period piece. Like, I'm always down for it. And of course, with the dynamic and the nature of this show lending itself towards, different skin tones, different races, and, all of this being represented in a Regency era, which only reflected one type of, skin tone, one type of race. It's just fun. It's enjoyable. It's cool to imagine, what that would look like. And it's just an enjoyable show. You get a little bit of mess, you see some gossip. There's a lot of visual, spectacle and splendor to attach yourself to. The dialogue, the characters, there's a lot here that still works. So I'm still very intrigued to see how things are going to play out in season 3, especially with Colin and Penelope at the forefront. I wasn't expecting that. I thought we were going to get Benedict's story next, but no, they are switching things up. And I think that given how Penelope and Colin's story ended this season, I'm sure it's going to be quite the journey to get them to the point where they're actually together. Because right now I'm like, don't know how that's going to work. Once again, thank you all for sticking around, even with the delays and, even just with the difficulties of trying to get all of this out. I appreciate you all sticking around. And I won't give myself too much pressure or static. I understand priorities are priorities, but sometimes we have expectations of ourselves. And I just would have preferred to have been able to knock this out and it not take so long. But I am still thankful that I was able to close it out properly. And, I definitely didn't want to just leave it, with no conclusion. So I definitely appreciate everyone who just stuck in there and still had positive feedback and enjoyed hearing what I had to say. So, once again, this is D, Movie Man, signing off, and I'll see you at the movie.